Hi, welcome to the Big Goals Leadership Interviews. I'm Juliet Robinson, and today for the first of our series of interviews, I've got Georgie Somerset here on the couch. Hi Georgie, thanks for coming.
Hi Juliet, it's great to be here.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of Georgie's background so you understand why it is such an incredible privilege to have some of her time and her insights today. I'm going to get Georgie to talk about her leadership background and her experiences of leadership through a whole lot of different enterprises. So, Georgie's a beef producer, lives in Queensland in Australia. She's a wife, a mother to 3 adult children, and she has an incredible professional portfolio. Georgie's on the board of a number of different organisations, including the Children's Hospital in Brisbane, the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and she consults to a number of national advisory boards, as well as, I think you've had experience with state boards as well, Georgie, haven't you?
I have, and various committees in between.
Right. Can you tell us some of your journey leading up to these leadership roles that you're in at the moment, Georgie?
That's right, because people hear about it when you're in these positions, but in fact there's been probably 20-25 years of leadership, and one of my first experiences was actually setting up a state industry body when I was about 19 or 20, and so learning to work with a voluntary team in a leadership capacity as their executive support. But I learnt so much about how a board and a committee can run and what it can do as well. So it's been really interesting going from small committees and layering through to boards.
You were a leader at a very young age. Did you find there were challenges with that?
Look, I think when you're young, you actually don't see the barriers as much as older people perceive you to be young.
Yeah.
So I think for me it was, I found people really respectful of your views and actually quite welcoming that you were there. There's sometimes that young upstart, but I think that part of the resilience of youth is that you sort of rise above that, and if you're driven and you're passionate about what you're doing,
You just keep going.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I actually think that I got more hands up than I got pushback.
Which is wonderful. Now, you established the Red Earth Community Foundation in 2012, which is all about developing leadership. Why do you think leadership is important?
Well, I think while businesses and organisations, and even in our own industry, growing beef, they're all fabulous products, but none of it would be possible without people. So for me, nothing happens unless we invest in people. So for me, any organisation, it comes back to people and culture. And I'd been extremely fortunate to experience one of Australia's leading leadership programs, the Australian Rural Leadership Program. And I wanted to give something back to people who weren't ready to do, a 2-year, 60-day, incredibly immersive program, but really wanted to gain more skills in their everyday life, whether it means being better parents, being a better member of the team in the business you're in, being a better manager, just being more confident in yourself. And so part of the reason for establishing the Community Foundation in our region was so that we could invest in leadership. And I just feel as though giving people skills will give them so much more in their own life.
And have you seen in the 6 years the program's been running some of those benefits coming through?
We're seeing extraordinary benefits. So personally, I see them with individuals and what they're achieving. They're stepping into roles they would never have imagined, and being much more powerful contributors than they could have seen. I think other people saw the potential in them. But what's also really interesting in seeing how they're giving much more to either their work or their community. So they're seeing themselves, they have a confidence to contribute. And so that confidence enables them to take part in a way that they feel is appropriate. It doesn't mean that they have to be everywhere and do everything, but they feel comfortable in what they're doing and they feel comfortable in their own skin. And so they can find the role that's right for them.
And so they're leading others then and continuing this, the leadership
and
development.
As a parent, I often say leadership, the greatest leadership journey is around parenting, which is really fascinating and challenging, and you're always learning. And so even if these people, if all they did was become better members of their family, I think that's incredibly powerful as well.
Absolutely. You've had experience with a whole range of leadership across government enterprises, primary industry, small business, large business, not-for-profits. Do you see a difference in the leadership that's required in each of these entities? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, and at different layers. I mean, there are times when you need technical skills. There are times when you need soft skills. But I think the same thing across all these organisations is about respectful, authentic leadership, that valuing people for what they can contribute and realising that everybody brings different things to the team, And I think if people are focused on how can we get the best out of our team and how can our team contribute most effectively at the layer that we're at in the organisation, and that's from the board right through, then you really gain that benefit because it's a multiplier effect, because everybody's trying to get the most out of everybody in each team. So, but I do think it comes back to people all the time, no matter what size the organisation. In fact, in small organisations, it's even more important.
Yes.
But in large organisations, change won't happen without people, and great teams won't happen without people caring for people.
And leading them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think leadership takes courage. So you do have to be, you are the leader, you do have to take the tough decisions, and you have to make decisions for people as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop there because Georgie and I are sitting under an enormous tree and it's pouring with rain now and we're about to get soaked. So we'll come back to this as soon as we can. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Georgie Somerset on the Big Goals Leadership Series. It's pouring with rain outside. There's a real tropical downpour here, so we've moved inside for the rest of this, but you might hear some rain on the roof, so we'll try to talk loudly, Georgie, shall we?
We will.
Good. Look, my next question is, what do you enjoy about leadership?
Look, I think it's the challenge and the opportunity, but the really leadership is a space where you can bring about so much change, and I think you can change the conversation, you can change the way things are done, you can invest in people, you can invest in organisations, in businesses, in opportunities, you can take risks. They're all sounding more like risk-taking things than staying safe.
Yeah.
But I was only saying to a group the other day, you don't have to stay with the way it's always been done. And I think I've always been a change maker, and being in leadership positions actually helps you craft the future of an organisation. It helps you craft the sustainability of the people. You can take a 100-year view, as we do with the Community Foundation, or the 5-year view with the strategic plan, but you can be part of that, and you don't need to do it the way it's always been done if you're in leadership. I think for me it's actually quite freeing to be in leadership, and I find it much more difficult when I have to, when I'm not in a position to influence the decisions being made, and I have to just put up with the decisions being made, because I can usually find a different way of doing it. And it's not that the other way wasn't right for the time, but for me it's about finding what is right for our time and what's right for our people.
Absolutely. Well, you're not a leader who has ever played it safe, I think, are you?
No.
You're always looking for what can be done better and what can be changed.
I worked for my parents when I first left school for 2 years. I did work for someone for about 18 months, but then I started my own business at 19. So, you know, I have been self-employed for most of my life in various forms, in the sense that being in leadership roles is often like being self-employed. You have to be self-motivated, you have to find the strength within yourself to make the decisions, and you have to work with a team of people. People who are self-employed often think that they're doing it alone, but they can only do it if they've got relationships and people who support them. So, you know, essentially, that you're right, I've never played it safe, but on the other hand, I think that there are so many opportunities we can take advantage of, that we will miss things if we don't look for those opportunities.
Well, I think also you've had some leadership roles where you haven't had positional authority, but you have created a leadership space by driving for change and driving to make things better, to improve the situation.
And I think you can do that by building a team around you. So you can, leadership is certainly not about position, it is about creating influence and finding the team of people that you can work with. And bringing people on a journey. I think the other thing for me that was a really simple picture of leadership painted for me a long time is leaders see where you could go, but then show you the safe way to get there. It's one thing to paint the picture, it's the other thing to help other people who can't see the way get there. So they find the map and the way through, and help others navigate that journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me, what have been some of the challenges that you've found that have shaped your leadership style over the years?
You have to find the strength within yourself. I think for me, one of the things about leadership is learning so much more about myself than anybody else, and finding the space that I'm really comfortable functioning in. And the challenges and the knockbacks along the way, and there will be knockbacks. There'll be people who don't agree with you around the table. There'll be projects that don't succeed.
And sometimes people looking for you to fail too.
Absolutely.
People who are so challenged by what you're trying to do.
And people who ostensibly support you, but then aren't actually there for you. So that's a
Yes.
bit of a paint the picture, but I can't quite give you the map. You'll have to
Yes.
find your own way. Leadership can also be really lonely.
Yes.
Certainly as a director, there's often not many people very few people that you can discuss the issues that you're dealing with at a board level with. And so you
Beyond
need
the
to,
board.
that's right. So you need to build your own capacity to refresh and renew without necessarily being able to sit and talk that through. And so I think it is about, finding, as I say, you need to love what you're doing as a leader.
Excuse me.
Bless you. But the challenges to me are just learning opportunities, and I say that to people who are having it's chosen and unchosen change, and how do you deal with that, and learning to respond, not react, and to sit in the space and not feel like you've got to have all the answers. That was a great quote this week I heard, is that leadership is not about having the answers. It's about feeling comfortable about finding the answers. And you might not have the answers at all. You may just be the person that can help others find them.
And having the courage to ask the questions too, and not just accept the way things are at the moment.
That's right. And there's so many people who specialise that we can call on to support us and help us, particularly in organisations. You can bring in great skills at different times, but as a leader you actually need to recognise that you might not have all those skills, and you have to be big enough to say, I'm going to call someone else in to do this. And I always think, in terms of when I'm working with a team, I love it when they say, well, I'm actually not going to present on this, I'm going to get the person who's been working on it to present, because they're devolving the skills, they're devolving the opportunity as well.
I agree, and they're not only developing other people, but they're saying, I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the room, but I know how to get the smartest person into the room. Which is such a strength as a leader, isn't it?
And I think people will see through those who think they've got all the answers as well, that it won't be something that appeals to other people either.
Because that authenticity is so important.
It is, and somebody said, is it overdone? I said there is nothing overdone about authentic. I don't mind how often people use it, because if it truly is there, people will work with it.
Because it is an overused word, there's no doubt about it. But it's been a long time coming as well, hasn't it?
It's very recent. 10 years ago, people weren't talking about authentic leadership. They the first books were just coming out about finding it, and for me, I think too, living in a rural community, there's not much about you that people don't know. And so, there is only one. There's only one of me, and it's exhausting. I can imagine it would only be exhausting to try and have two personas. So I think that's the other thing, that be true to yourself by being the same person. And the more I've worked with different people, that authenticity of I am who I am at work or at play really shines through. I treat the people I work with the same as I treat my family and my colleagues.
Which helps build trust too, because people know what they're getting. But I think sometimes that authenticity requires some self-awareness, doesn't it? If you don't have that level of self-awareness, it's really hard to say, this is me.
And this is what I've noticed when we've run the leadership programs in our community over the last 5 years, is that the self-awareness has built the self-esteem that then allows people to be who they truly are. And that might mean not actually stepping back from things. So might be about saying, actually, I'm not in the right role. I don't want to lead people. I actually want to be part of the team. I don't want to be the president. I just want to turn up and participate. So that takes courage as well, to step back. But to me, that's just as much about leadership, about recognising what you don't want to do, and being clear about that, as feeling like you've got to do everything.
Yes. I was talking to somebody recently and was suggesting she join a board. And she said, actually, I'm much better behind the scenes. I don't want to be in that position, but I can help behind the scenes in all sorts of different ways. And I think some of that is that awareness that there are different ways to contribute.
There are. And it's interesting with boards. I think a lot of people don't actually understand what boards do and the role they play. And I've said it a few times, that if a board is doing their job, they're quite invisible. They're incredibly behind the scenes.
Yes,
with the Royal Flying Doctor Service, people just expect the flying doctor to be there when they need them, and to turn up for the clinics and to provide the mental health service or whatever we're doing at the time. And if the board is doing the right job, we will be there. We're 90 years old now. We'll be there for another 90 years because we're sustaining the organisation. we don't require any recognition. The recognition for us is that the service is there day in, day out, and I think that in itself is one of the marks of leadership, is not feeling that you need to be the one who's getting recognised all the time as well. For me, the recognition is when I see the people who've gone through the leadership program, or the organisation that I'm on the board of, or a policy change that we've been working towards for 3 years with government. When you see really effective change taking place, that's when you actually get rewarded, or can. And for me also, it's about when you put new teams in place, or a new CEO, a strategic plan. It's those longer term things that there's very little personal recognition or reward.
Yeah.
And you actually need to feel comfortable with that as well as a leader. I think, to me, leadership is not about the individual; it's about the whole team.
Yes, and the organisation that you're trying to lead, or the
Absolutely.
community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, Georgie, what do you look for in aspiring leaders or new leaders that you are recruiting or coming across?
It's a great question. I almost feel that they self-identify because they start to ask the questions, and they show an interest, and they step into roles. But I think it is about having a degree of energy and interest and enthusiasm. And I don't mean that in an extroverted way, but an enthusiasm for ideas and creativity and approaching things. But I also really look for possibility thinking. So if I'm working with someone and all I hear back if I suggest some things is, I haven't got time, I can't, it's too hard, I didn't do that course, I haven't been to uni, those sorts of things. Yes, exactly. Oh, I couldn't do that. I don't know anybody. I'm like, well, all those things are overcomeable, but you've got to have a possibility thinking.
Yeah.
You've got to be open to opportunities. So it's when people say, I get people who don't know me contacting me on LinkedIn saying, I've got this coming up, would there be any chance you could give me some support? I think that's fantastic, and I'll try and stay in touch with them, because that takes real courage to say, you're doing some things I'm interested in, I'd love to learn something.
To reach out.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think they do self-select, in the sense that they look for opportunities, they invest in themselves, they turn up and take the opportunities, they do the extra mile. So within an organisation, they're the people that go the extra mile, that are really receptive to questions. So when you ask them questions, they say, oh, that is such a good point, I'd never thought about that when I was working on this project. Can we talk more about that? Or I've been thinking about that too. It's not within the parameters, but I'd love to explore it. Can you give me permission to do that? So they go the extra mile to think about the broader picture rather than just doing what's being asked of them.
And it is so refreshing when you see that, isn't it?
Oh, it's
when
exciting.
You see young leaders coming through.
Years ago, I read an article about a significant advertising firm that his philosophy was that he was really the smallest babushka doll, and he was seeking to always hire people who would build that babushka doll so that it would never stop growing. And so his philosophy was that if he only hired people like him, or people he could control, the babushka doll would just shrink and shrivel. But if he always hired people who were more creative, more exciting, more innovative,
sometimes smarter.
Absolutely. There is no limit to how large that doll could become in the future. And so I think that's the thing that...
It's a wonderful image, isn't it?
That's right. There should always be much smarter people than me coming through, doing things much more creatively and sooner than we did them.
Yes, And things move faster now. There is so much information out there that helps them.
I still think relationships are so critical, though, too, that you need to spend time. There is going to be no substitute for spending time building relationships, whether that's face-to-face or virtual. I'm a great believer in both, but I think you do need to invest in relationships and invest in your own network, so that you've got a support network that's outside of any one thing you're working on.
I think that's such a good point, because that doesn't get a lot of airtime when we talk about development. And often people are very scared of that whole building a network and maintaining it, or working it, as they say.
Yeah, so I talk about scaffolding, and it doesn't matter if you're painting the gutter on your roof or you're working on the 50th floor of a building. You need scaffolding to support you if something goes wrong. But you also need scaffolding to do a good job. You just need to get the right foothold to paint the gutter. You need to be scaffolded to clean the windows or paint the building. leadership's a bit the same. You need people who scaffold you at no matter what level you are. So there'll be probably different people during your life, and there'll be different times when you talk with
At
different people.
stages of your career,
but you absolutely need people around you, and so that's the term I use is to scaffold. They don't do it for you, but they're there to catch you, and they're there to support you to do it.
Yeah, and I think certainly within women in leadership, there's more talk about that now, about helping one another.
And I think that it's important that you have a range of those people. So you know, there's been some fantastic men who supported me, but also some great women, and I think it's important that you get a diversity of views, and you also have people who challenge you, who say, why did you do that?
Yes.
Why do you think that?
What were you thinking?
Yes, exactly. And if I thought this was a good idea. Oh, it's a stupid idea. You know, so you do need people who hold you to account.
Who will challenge and confront you. Yes, I think that's true. And I know some of the leaders I've worked with who have been less than impressive have been the ones who've surrounded themselves with people who just say, yeah, that's a great idea.
Exactly. And very traditional patriarchal linear styles of leadership were built around command and control.
Yes.
So that was how it was easy to make things work in the Industrial Revolution. It was very easy to get things done. In a disaster situation, it's perfect. Someone just needs to tell everybody what to do, and they need to do it straight away. In the sort of world we're now in, and the people we work with, it's about connections and collaboration, and no, power does not sit with one person in any space anymore. And that's really exciting, but it can be very challenging if you're used to linear forms of leadership.
Okay.
And I think too, in our schools and our institutions, we have had linear in the past. I think we're even trying to move more to collaboration and self-guided learning, and you need to show some initiative to get through these things. It's not all about one person standing and delivering the whole time.
It's about learning how to learn and how to work with others.
And the skills of the future are going to be things like collaboration and co-design and democracy. So it's about, you know, those really early stage things about how do you negotiate an outcome for mutual benefit rather than a win-lose. How do you co-design things? So, I mean, if you think about how classrooms are often set up now, it's 4 or 5 children working together. It needs to be what it is. They need to learn how to negotiate through a challenge together. I even go back to sort of the preschool stage. They need to learn negotiation in play to learn how to negotiate as adults. If you can't negotiate that you want the curved block to finish your bridge, then you're going to have problems when you're 15 trying to negotiate something and 25. So
how to share your toys, basically.
Exactly. And it you know, so I think the more we can teach those skills from a really early age, and we can instill them into our work systems and our learning systems, the co-design and co-collaboration I think is really important.
Yeah, and the skills that you need for that are coming through, I see, in a younger generation.
Absolutely. And I believe they're much kinder, they're more democratic. For all the press there is, they're actually much more considerate about the broader world. Yeah. They think about the sustainability question, the long term. They weren't things that we were considering in our day. No. So there's a different, but we sat in a classroom and had someone speak to us often for 90 minutes, whereas they will now often present back and be doing the teaching as well.
They're being taught how to learn.
That's right. Yes. And they talk about we'll be working with people who might have 15 or 20 jobs in their life. So we have to also, as leaders, understand that people will not necessarily stay with us for years, but they may pass in and out. And I think that's been the interesting thing for me as someone who has come and gone from certain parts of industry. I'll often come back to working with people I worked with 30 years ago. I've had some roles from people who've called me 20 years after we worked together to say, something's come up, I think you're the person for the job. There's the expression about sort of, you know, looking after people as you climb the ladder. It's also about, you know, casting the net. As you climb there, you cast the net and bring others with you. It's incredibly important that you build relationships as you go, because you never know when you might come back to those relationships or what role those people might be in later on.
Absolutely, yes. Interesting. Do you have any leadership heroes?
I don't think there's any one, you know, that I go, oh, that is just the... You know, there's fabulous international people that you look at and you think, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing to sit around a table with, you know, Nelson Mandela and Gandhi and even more current ones like Mary Robinson and, would it be great to sit and chew the fat with them and Barack Obama and things and just talk about how did they come to some of the conclusions, how did they do that. But really for me, a lot of the heroes are the people who've actually shown me the way. So parents that had courage to be different, who took some real steps of leadership of their own, but also believed in us to be leaders. I'm now on the board of the ABC, but my first letter to the ABC was in grade 5, just correcting a slight editorial thing on the news that they didn't have quite right. So, parents that didn't say, oh, that's silly, don't write to them, but parents who actually helped you write that letter. And I think all through my life, I've probably been attracted to seeking out people. I've invested an enormous amount in turning up to courses and listening to everybody from Jim Rohn down. But it's all of those things layer up to show you that leadership's no one person, it's no one hero, but it is people who are kind and generous. They are the true selves on stage and off stage in a sense, or in the boardroom or at home. They're people who truly want to collaborate for the good of the organisation that you're working with, but also society in general. For
a bigger picture.
Yeah. So they have in mind all the time who the client or the patient or the person that you're serving is, and I think that comes back to leadership is about serving people. It's not about personal glory. It is about finding causes that you're passionate about in business or community or life, and serving those passions with the skills that you can contribute.
Look, thank you so much, Georgie, for your time and your insights.
That's fine, Juliet.
I think you can probably see why Georgie's so successful in her professional career. One of the things I didn't mention was that she is the vice chair of an agricultural lobby group, AgForce, in Queensland. So she spends time representing the views of others and working in an industry that's constantly evolving too, don't you?
It is, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much. I should declare also Georgie is my younger sister. So that's not why she's here though. She's here because although I'm incredibly proud of her, she's here because she's a fabulous leader and she has so much to say on the topic. So I hope you've got a lot out of it. You can check out more about what we do at biggoals.com.au and we'll see you at the next interview. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.